When my mom died 5 years ago, everything in my life shifted. I was 22, had just started working as a dental assistant in Tulsa, and suddenly I found myself taking care of my dad full-time. He was grieving, obviously, but also dealing with worsening diabetes and high blood pressure. Someone had to make sure he took his meds, kept his doctor appointments, ate right, and could just function day to day. That someone was me. I moved back into the house I grew up in. A one-story, older but solid place on the edge of town with faded blue siding and a creaky back door that never quite closed right in the winter. I paid the rent. I bought the groceries. I paid for his prescriptions, the co-pays, the utilities, and all the random things that pop up when you're managing someone else's life. It wasn't easy, especially on a dental assistant's salary, but I managed. I cut corners, worked extra shifts, didn't take vacations. I hadn't had more than 3 days off in a row in over 4 years. My older brother Brandon was a ghost during all of this. He'd moved to Seattle years ago, married Rachel, and maybe showed up once a year for Thanksgiving or Christmas if we were lucky. He never offered help financially or otherwise. When Mom died, he came in for the funeral, cried a lot, said he'd be around more, then left the next morning and went radio silent for almost 11 months. That first year I was too numb to care. By year 2 I was bitter. By year 3 I stopped expecting anything at all. It was 2 weeks before Thanksgiving when my phone lit up with Brandon's name. I was in the middle of stocking the supply cabinet at work, and I remember just staring at the screen trying to decide if I even wanted to answer. But something about how rare it was made me feel like I had to. I picked up. He opened with small talk, asking how I was doing, how Dad was, what the weather was like in Tulsa. I kept my answers short. I didn't really feel like playing catch-up. Then he dropped it. Things weren't going well in Seattle. He'd lost his job. Rachel had left him, apparently took most of their savings when she went. He didn't have anywhere to go and he needed to come home. Just for a while, he said. Just to get back on his feet. I said nothing for a good 15 seconds. I could hear him breathing on the line, waiting for me to respond. I was angry. Not just because he was coming back with nothing, but because he had never once been there when I needed help. All these years of me doing everything, and now he gets to waltz in because his life imploded. But I also felt guilty. He's my brother. He has nowhere else to go. What was I supposed to say? Well, so I told him okay. He could come back for a bit. I tried to make my tone neutral, but I think he picked up on the coldness. He didn't push. Just said he'd be arriving the next weekend and he'd appreciate it a lot. That following Saturday he showed up around noon in an old U-Haul that looked like it might fall apart in the driveway. He had maybe a dozen boxes and a mattress strapped to the top of his SUV. No Rachel, no big explanations. Just said it had been a rough few months. Dad was excited to see him, of course. It had been over a year, and even though I was the one taking care of everything, he still lit up like a kid when Brandon walked in. I had cleared out the guest room ahead of time, the one across the hall from mine. I'd been using it for storage, but I moved all my stuff into the garage to give him space. He didn't thank me, but he looked tired and I figured maybe he just didn't have it in him. I told myself not to expect too much, not right away. The first week things were awkward but calm. He slept late most days and said he was job hunting online in the afternoons, but I never saw him actually apply to anything. He left dirty dishes in the sink, never offered to help with groceries or dinner, and didn't seem to notice that I was still paying for everything just like before. Then came the conversation that lit the fuse. It was the Thursday before Thanksgiving. I got home late after picking up a double shift because we needed extra money for groceries and insulin. I walked in the door and Brandon was sitting on the couch with his feet on the coffee table, watching something on Netflix, a half-eaten pizza box open in front of him. He looked up at me like I just interrupted something. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't like his tone. I was exhausted, still wearing my scrubs, and just wanted to shower and maybe eat something before collapsing. But I sat down anyway. He leaned forward and said, "I've been thinking. I need more space. That room's too small. I can't get comfortable in there, especially with all the stuff I need to unpack. So I was thinking, you could move your stuff out of the master bedroom and take the laundry room. It's already got a small daybed in there, right?" I thought he was joking at first. I laughed. But he didn't. He just stared at me, serious as ever. I asked him if he really thought it was fair to ask me, the person who's been living here, paying rent, taking care of Dad, handling everything, to move into a laundry room so he could have my bedroom. He shrugged and said, "It's not about fair. It's just practical. You're barely home anyway. I'm here more. And honestly, it makes sense for me to have a real room if I'm going to be job hunting full-time." I stared at him, stunned. I couldn't believe he was actually saying this. That he had the audacity to not only take advantage of the situation but to make demands on top of it. I told him no. Absolutely not. That room was mine. I'd been living in it for years and I wasn't moving into a space barely big enough to stand in just because he was job hunting. He got defensive fast. Said I was being selfish. Said I wasn't making it easy for him to get back on track. He even had the nerve to bring up Mom, saying she'd want us to support each other. I told him not to go there. That he didn't get to invoke her name when he'd been absent for so long. That if anyone was disrespecting her memory, it was him. That ended the conversation. He stormed off to the guest room and slammed the door. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time, too tired to cry, too angry to do anything else. And that was just the beginning. It was Sunday afternoon, exactly 5 days before Thanksgiving, and I was coming back from the grocery store, arms full with 3 heavy bags and a splitting headache from working overtime all week. I remember thinking I'd finally have a quiet evening, maybe finish meal prepping, maybe even soak in the tub. But as I turned onto our street and pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. Brandon's SUV was there, the same one he'd dragged across 3 states a couple of weeks earlier. But parked behind it was something I definitely wasn't expecting. A silver Hyundai Sonata I didn't recognize. It didn't even occur to me right away. I walked inside, juggling the bags, already half ready to nag Brandon for not texting me that he was having someone over, until I walked into the living room and saw her. She was sitting on the couch like she owned the place, legs crossed, her shoes off and neatly set by the coffee table. She had her phone in one hand and a half-empty mug of tea in the other. Brandon was in the armchair, laughing at something she just said, while my dad sat nearby in his recliner, clearly trying too hard to look neutral. I stood there for a second, confused, maybe hoping I was imagining things. But Rachel glanced up, met my eyes and gave me this half-smile, the kind you give to someone you don't like but you're pretending to be polite to because you're in their house. No one said anything right away, so I finally just asked what I shouldn't have had to. What's going on? Brandon said like it was the most casual thing in the world. Change of plans. We came early. Long drive and Rachel wanted to beat the holiday traffic. Rachel chimed in with, plus we figured we'd help with Thanksgiving stuff since, you always complain about doing it alone. I didn't say anything back. I was too busy doing math in my head. 2 bedrooms. 3 adults already here. And now Rachel, who was supposed to be out of the picture, back in it somehow. I walked past them without a word into the kitchen, dumped the bags on the counter a little harder than I meant to and tried to calm myself down. Not 10 minutes later, I was in the middle of putting away groceries when Dad shuffled in, like he'd drawn the short straw and been sent in to talk to me. He cleared his throat and stood there awkwardly, leaning against the doorway. Hey kiddo, he said softly, can we talk a sec? I already knew it was going to be bad. He didn't get to the point right away. Said a few things about how it was nice to see Brandon and Rachel getting along again, how it reminded him of the old days when everyone was together. I stayed quiet, just kept unloading the fridge. Then came the part one knew was coming. So, listen, they're going to need a bit more space while they're here. Rachel's not really comfortable sleeping on the couch and well, the guest room's a little tight. Brandon was wondering if it made sense for them to have your room just while they get settled. It'd just be for a few days, sweetheart. Maybe a week. I stood up straight, slowly closed the fridge door and turned to look at him. And where am I supposed to go? He didn't meet my eyes. We were thinking, maybe the laundry room? Just for now. It's quiet in there. You won't even hear them at night. Actually laughed. I didn't mean to, it just slipped out. It sounded bitter and ugly even to my own ears. You want me to sleep in the laundry room so that Brandon and Rachel can have my room? He held up his hands like he was trying to calm me. It's temporary, Ash. Just while they figure things out. I could hear Brandon laughing in the living room again. I don't know if he heard us or was just being himself, but the timing couldn't have been worse. And then I heard her, Rachel, say something like, honestly, I don't even care which room it is. As long as it doesn't smell like cat pee or dust. I don't own a cat. I felt something sharp twist in my chest. It wasn't just about the room. It was everything. Years of taking care of this house, of Dad, of the bills. Brandon disappears for half a decade, and the moment he shows up again, everything revolves around him. Now even Rachel, who I thought was long gone, gets a seat at the table, and not just any seat but mine. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to walk out and not come back. But instead I nodded slowly. Fine, I said. If that's what everyone wants, I'll take the laundry room. Dad put a hand on my shoulder like I'd just made some noble sacrifice. Thank you. Really. It means a lot. I didn't say anything else. I just walked past him, went into my room and closed the door. I packed that night. Didn't even bother folding most things. Just shoved what I needed into a couple of duffel bags and dragged them into the laundry room. It wasn't a room really. Just a narrow strip between the kitchen and garage with a washer, a dryer, and a dusty old twin daybed we kept for emergencies. I'd put a clean sheet on it once when my friend Jessica crashed after a party, but no one had used it since. There was no window. No closet. Just a rickety lamp in the corner and the smell of detergent soaked into the walls. I laid down that night in the half-dark, the humming of the dryer inches from my head, and tried not to cry. It wasn't the room. It was the message, you're not important. You're convenient. You're the one who makes room for others, no matter how much you've already given. In the morning, Rachel was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee from my favorite mug. Brandon was shirtless, digging through the fridge like he lived here. I walked past them, grabbed my keys and left without a word. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't breathe inside that house anymore. Not with them acting like I was the guest. The day after I moved into the laundry room, everything started shifting, and not in a subtle way. Rachel wasted no time making it clear she wasn't just visiting. She had claimed her territory, and the first thing she set her sights on was the kitchen. My kitchen. The only space in the house that had still felt like mine after everything else had been chipped away. That illusion didn't last long. I came home from work that Monday around 6, exhausted and ready to heat up leftovers and crash early. As soon as I opened the front door, something felt off. The smell of my usual lavender dish soap had been replaced by the sharp chemical bite of some new citrus-scented cleaner. The layout was different too. My spice rack, the little wooden one I'd bought secondhand and refinished myself, was gone from the wall. My apron wasn't hanging by the fridge anymore. The counter space, which I always kept tidy and functional, was now cluttered with some sleek but ugly espresso machine, a digital bread maker still in its box, and rows of mismatched glass jars labeled in Rachel's handwriting. I walked in slowly, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The toaster was gone. The microwave had been moved to the other side of the kitchen. My small container of homemade chicken soup I'd left in the fridge the night before, dumped. Replaced with store-bought protein smoothies and meal prep containers labeled with her initials. And then I saw it, my old lunchbox. A blue insulated one I'd had since dental school. It wasn't much, a little stained, a little worn at the edges, but it had been with me through years of early mornings and late nights. It was sitting on top of the trash bin, open like someone had started to throw it out but hadn't even cared enough to shut the lid. Rachel walked in behind me, holding a glass of lemon water, barefoot, dressed like she was lounging at a spa. "Oh hey," she said casually, barely glancing up from her phone. "I did a little reorganizing. That old stuff was taking up so much space. Don't worry, I made room for the things we actually use." I blinked at her, speechless. "You threw out my lunchbox?" She rolled her eyes. "It was gross. You can get another one. There's a Target down the road." I felt the heat rising in my face. I wanted to scream, to demand she put everything back exactly how it was, but I knew what would happen if I did. She'd play the victim, Brandon would swoop in, and somehow I'd end up looking unreasonable again. So I said nothing. I took the trash out myself just to rescue the lunchbox, even though I knew I'd never use it again. Not after it had been treated like garbage. That was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Rachel transformed the entire house in quiet, smug increments. The dining chairs got swapped out with ones she claimed were more ergonomic, though no one asked her to replace them. She ordered throw pillows for the couch and told me they were a gift for Dad, as if I hadn't decorated that space myself when Mom passed. She replaced the coffee maker, my old drip one that still worked fine, with some complicated, expensive machine that made exactly one kind of coffee and beeped like a car alarm when it finished. Even the silverware changed. I noticed it one morning when I grabbed a spoon and realized it was heavier, sleeker, unfamiliar. My dad didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did and just didn't want to deal with the tension. Brandon didn't say a word either, or at least not about Rachel. But he sure had plenty to say about me. He started making comments about my schedule, usually during breakfast when I was rushing to get ready for another double shift. He'd be in his pajamas, drinking espresso with his laptop open on the table, half-heartedly scrolling through job postings but mostly reading Twitter. Once, as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, he looked up and said, "You're just leaving now? Must be nice." I froze for a second. "I've been working doubles all week," I said flatly. He shrugged. "Still, I'm trying to get a business started here and you're gone all the time. Dad's here alone all day." I didn't respond. I just walked out. But the words stuck to me like sweat on my skin. He was trying to make it sound like I wasn't doing enough. Like I was the problem for working too much. Never mind that I was the one covering the bills while he and his resurrected wife took over the house. He kept at it too. A few days later I came home late, almost 10 p.m. and found a note taped to the fridge. In Brandon's handwriting, "If you're not going to be around for dinner, let us know next time." We waited. They had waited. In my house. At my table. Eating my food, probably cooked using my pans that Rachel didn't toss yet. I didn't even see Dad anymore, not really. He was always sitting quietly in the background, watching TV or reading old magazines, avoiding eye contact like he didn't know which side to take. I knew he was overwhelmed. Maybe confused. Maybe trying to keep the peace in a house that no longer had any. But it didn't change the fact that he wasn't saying anything while they erased me from the life I'd built here. The final blow came a few nights later. I came into the living room to grab something from my bag and found Rachel on the couch, curled up with a blanket that used to belong to Mom, one of the last things that still smelled like her. She was scrolling through her tablet, humming along to some show she had playing, and didn't even notice me standing there. I asked her where the blanket had been. I hadn't seen it in months. She said she found it in a box in the garage and thought it was too nice to be collecting dust. That was the moment I realized I didn't live here anymore. Not really. I existed here. I slept in a converted laundry closet, kept my shoes in a bin under the sink, and came and went like a ghost. They weren't visitors. They were occupants. And I was the guest. Thanksgiving used to mean something in our house. Not just the food or the decorations, but the way my mom used to make it feel warm even during the colder years. After she passed, I tried to carry that spirit forward. Every year since, I'd made the turkey using her notes, yellowed and oil-stained in Grandma Ruth's handwriting. I followed them to the letter even when I was dead on my feet from work. The stuffing was always from scratch with sausage and apple, not that box stuff. Dad loved it that way. Said it was the only thing that still tasted like the holidays used to. This year I had everything planned out ahead of time. I'd taken Wednesday off, the only full day I could manage to get, and I started prepping early. The turkey had been thawing in the fridge since Sunday. I had celery and onions chopped, cornbread drying out for the stuffing, pies ready to bake, the table linens already cleaned and ironed. I thought that maybe just for a few hours I could make the house feel like ours again. When I walked into the kitchen that morning around 8, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It didn't smell like Thanksgiving. It smelled like lemon zest, rosemary, and quinoa. Rachel was already there, in full motion, standing at the counter in workout leggings and a matching sports bra, tossing something into a bowl while blasting a podcast about hormone balancing from her phone. Brandon was behind her, holding a grocery bag I definitely hadn't bought, unpacking things like almond flour, chia seeds, kale, and some weird meat substitute wrapped in wax paper. I stood there for a second, confused. "What's going on?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Rachel didn't even pause what she was doing. "We're switching it up this year," she said brightly, like we'd all had a family meeting and voted unanimously. "I've been looking into some anti-inflammatory recipes, and honestly, that traditional stuff is just a gut bomb. Gluten, dairy, red meat. It's a disaster. I figured we'd go healthier." I stared at the counter where my ingredients had been just the night before. Gone. The turkey was no longer in its tray. The stuffing prep bowls were missing. "Where's my turkey?" I asked. She pointed toward the trash can with her elbow. The packaging said it wasn't organic. Plus it smelled kind of weird. I didn't want to take the risk with your dad's health. I got a free-range herb-rubbed turkey breast from Whole Foods instead. Cooks in half the time. Brandon chuckled and added, "It's honestly better this way. Dad's not getting any younger and your usual menu is like 90% sodium." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just walked over to the trash, lifted the lid, and saw it. My turkey, raw and fully thawed, sitting in a torn garbage bag on top of the stuffing cornbread and the pecan pie filling I'd prepped. They'd thrown it all away. Like it was nothing. Like my effort, my time, my memories didn't matter. They didn't even pretend to apologize. Rachel kept cooking, humming along to her podcast, taking up every inch of counter space. Brandon started pulling out plates and setting the table like it was all decided. Dad came into the kitchen around 10. He shuffled in with his cane, still wearing his slippers, and blinked like he hadn't registered the situation yet. I tried to catch his eye to get some kind of reaction, but he just rubbed his forehead and muttered, "Smells different." Rachel lit up. "Right. That's the rosemary and sage blend. No processed oils either. Everything's olive or avocado based. You're going to feel amazing after this." I left the room before I said something I couldn't take back. The meal was served around 3. The table was filled with bowls of things no one had asked for. Roasted Brussels sprouts with vinegar reduction, mashed cauliflower instead of potatoes, cranberry sauce made from actual cranberries but without sugar, which made it taste like sour jelly. The turkey breast was dry. Rachel forgot to baste it. Dad didn't say much. He just picked at his plate, chewing slowly, barely finishing half of what was there. No one mentioned the stuffing. No one even looked at me. After we cleared the plates, Rachel insisted we all sit in the living room to digest and chat. I was about to sneak off back to my laundry room when Brandon said, "Hey Ash, you should probably stay for this." That was the moment I knew. I sat down on the very edge of the couch, still in my work jeans, arms crossed over my chest. Rachel sat beside Dad, a little too close, her hand on his arm like she'd been part of this family forever. Brandon sat across from us, legs spread out like he was running the meeting. "So," he started, "we've been thinking. This whole setup. Us being here, you juggling work, the house needing some real coordination, it's not really sustainable as is." Rachel nodded sympathetically. "We really want to create a stable environment for your dad. One that doesn't rely so much on chaos and stress. That tiny laundry room situation, for example. That's not healthy for anyone. I didn't say anything. I just waited for the punchline. Brandon continued, Rachel and I talked about staying here a little longer. Maybe a few months. Just to make sure Dad's routine is really locked in. And if that's going to work, we need to use the whole space more efficiently. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at Dad. Like it was up to him to deliver the final blow. Dad cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. Ashley, honey, maybe it's time we rethink the room situation. You've been great really, but with Brandon here full-time now and Rachel helping out around the house, maybe you should think about getting a place of your own. Just to spread your wings a little. Spread my wings. I had paid the rent for the last 5 years. I had taken him to every doctor's appointment, cleaned up after every bad night, made every holiday dinner, bought every goddamn blood pressure pill and insulin pen. And now he was gently suggesting I find somewhere else to go. Because Brandon and Rachel were suddenly the stable ones. The ones who'd been there all of 5 minutes and brought kale and chaos. I looked at them all. Brandon pretending this was some logical adult conversation, Rachel with her smug little half-smile, and Dad who couldn't even meet my eyes. I didn't trust myself to speak. If I opened my mouth I was going to break something. Maybe myself. So I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water with shaking hands, and went back into the laundry room. Not a bedroom. Not even a room. Just a space for washing clothes that now doubled as the place where I slept. Where I ate. Where I tried to hold myself together. They had taken the house. And now they were coming for the rest of it. I sat alone in the laundry room for what felt like hours after that conversation. No one knocked on the door. No one checked in. I could still hear the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen, the occasional burst of laughter from Rachel, the low hum of Brandon's voice as he recounted some story about a startup he almost launched. They had moved on with their evening like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just sat me down and suggested I pack up the life I'd built in that house and get out. My phone sat on the floor next to me. I stared at it for a long time before finally picking it up and dialing the number I knew by heart. Savannah answered on the second ring. Hey girl, she said, her voice warm and steady like always. I didn't even get out a full sentence. I think I just said, is the offer still open? And without hesitation she answered, absolutely. Come whenever you're ready. I'll make up the guest room. Savannah had been offering for months now, ever since I first mentioned how things were getting tense at home. She lived across town in a quiet duplex with a spare bedroom and a big heart, and I had kept turning her down because I didn't want to leave my dad. I had always thought he needed me. But now I wasn't so sure. Maybe he just needed someone. And it didn't have to be me anymore. I didn't pack with ceremony. I didn't fold or organize. I just opened my duffel and started throwing clothes in. Work scrubs, jeans, a couple sweaters, socks, the blanket from my bed, the toothbrush I kept in a tin by the sink. I packed fast with a kind of cold clarity, like I didn't want to give myself time to second-guess it. I didn't bother touching anything that wasn't mine, didn't look twice at the family photos on the hallway wall or the framed cross-stitch that used to hang in the living room. They belonged to a version of the house that didn't exist anymore. I walked through the kitchen just after 8. Brandon and Rachel were still there, finishing tea and picking at whatever leftover kale salad hadn't gone limp. Rachel looked up as I passed, said, "Everything okay?" Like she hadn't been part of the reason I was leaving. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. My coat was already on. I was halfway down the front steps when I heard the door open behind me. My dad's voice, low and cautious, called out, "Ashley. Wait." I stopped but didn't turn around. He walked down the steps slowly, careful on his knees, until he stood behind me. "You really going?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah. I am." There was silence between us for a moment, the kind that usually came after a fight but before an apology. Except there was no fight, and I didn't think an apology was coming either. "I didn't mean to push you out," he said quietly. "You didn't have to," I replied. "You just let it happen." He shifted like he wanted to put a hand on my shoulder but thought better of it. "I just thought maybe it was time. You've done so much for me. Too much. You need to live your life." I turned to face him then. "You're right," I said. "I do." He looked tired. Older than I remembered, even though I saw him every day. I think he thought he was giving me permission. What he didn't understand was that I didn't need it anymore. I took a breath and added, "I would have stayed. As long as you needed. But not like this. Not while they treat me like I don't belong in my own home. And not while you let them." He didn't argue. Just stood there, lips pressed tight, nodding like he knew I was right but couldn't bring himself to say it out loud. "I'll come by next week for the rest of my stuff," I said. "You don't have to wait up." And with that I walked to my car. Savannah had texted me her address while I was packing. 15 minutes away. I started the engine, felt the heater sputter to life, and pulled out of the driveway without looking back at the house. I didn't cry. Not this time. I felt the loss, sure, but also something else underneath it. Something solid and overdue. A kind of strength I didn't know I still had. It was never really about the room or the turkey or the couch pillows or even Rachel. It was about knowing when enough is enough. And for me it was that night. Thanksgiving. The night I left with a packed bag and my dignity intact. It was 4 days after I left the house when my phone rang, and I saw my dad's name pop up on the screen. I hesitated before answering, my thumb hovering over the green icon. We hadn't spoken since Thanksgiving night, and I had no idea what he'd say or what he wanted. Part of me was hoping it would be something like an apology or even just an acknowledgement. But it wasn't. He sounded tired and distracted, like he'd just woken up from a nap. "Ashley," he said, "I tried to pick up my prescriptions today, but they said the card was declined. Something about it not being valid anymore. Did the insurance change?" I was sitting at Savannah's kitchen table, my laptop open in front of me, a mug of cold coffee pushed off to the side. I blinked a few times trying to process what he was talking about. "What card?" I asked. "The pharmacy card. The one they usually charge. They said they tried running it twice and it came back inactive." I rubbed my temple. "That's my card, Dad. My personal card. I've been paying for your prescriptions out of pocket for over 4 years." There was a pause. A long one. I could hear him breathing on the other end. "Wait," he said slowly. "What do you mean yours?" "I mean I've been paying for everything," I said. "Rent, groceries, gas, medical copays, all your medications, even the glucose monitor and your blood pressure pills. You know those aren't covered." "That's me. That was always me." He didn't respond right away. And for once I let the silence hang. "Brandon said you were helping here and there," he finally said. "But I didn't know you were paying for all of it." I closed my laptop slowly, leaned back in the chair and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I wasn't helping, Dad. I was supporting both of us. The whole household. You think that card they ran at the pharmacy was some kind of family account? It's my name on that card. The house runs because I've been killing myself to keep it running." He didn't say anything. I heard a low exhale, like he'd sat down heavily. "How much are we talking about?" he asked, his voice small. I stood up and went to my bag, pulled out the battered folder I had carried out of the house with me, the one I'd used for budgeting, bills, receipts, all of it. I kept it organized out of necessity. I didn't trust apps or spreadsheets. I liked to see the paper. I liked knowing where every cent went. Savannah walked in just then with a load of laundry in her arms and saw me rifling through the papers. "Everything okay?" she asked, setting the basket down. "Sort of," I said. "My dad just found out I've been paying $3,000 a month to keep his lights on." She blinked. "Wait, what?" I pulled out the last 3 months of bank statements and handed them to her. She sat down, unfolded the pages and started scanning them, eyes growing wider with each line. "Groceries $800 a month?" she said aloud. "Walgreens $250. Electric bill, gas, water, rent. Jesus, Ashley. $2,800 on average," I said. "Some months a little more. Some a little less. But never less than $2,000. She looked up at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because it never felt like an option," I said. Brandon was gone. Dad couldn't work. I had to step up. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because there was no one else. She leaned back in the chair, still holding the statements. "You've been doing this alone? Since you were 22? "Yeah." That word hung in the air like smoke. I heard my dad clear his throat on the line again. "Ashley, I didn't know. I swear. If I had known." "What?" I cut in. "What would you have done? Told Brandon to come back sooner? Asked him to chip in? You let them take my room. You let them erase me out of that house. You didn't ask questions then." He went quiet again. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke for themselves. "I'm not angry that you needed help," I said. "I'm angry that when I needed help, when I finally couldn't take any more, you made me feel like I was the problem. Like I was in the way." He sighed. "I didn't understand what you were giving up." "No," I said softly. "You didn't." Savannah got up and started making tea, like she knew I needed something warm in my hands. She didn't say anything else, just moved quietly around the kitchen while I stood there, still holding the folder, still hearing my dad's breath on the other end of the line. I didn't hang up right away. I let him sit in the silence, in the realization. Let it settle. Let him feel for the first time what it meant to carry the weight alone. After that call with my dad, I sat at Savannah's kitchen table for a long time, staring at the folder with all the financial breakdowns, my private evidence of the last 5 years of quiet sacrifice. It hit me hard, not just because they didn't know, but because they had never thought to ask. Not once. Brandon had assumed I was just helping out. My dad genuinely believed things somehow took care of themselves. "And Rachel? She didn't care enough to wonder how the fridge stayed full or how the internet stayed on or how his insulin magically arrived every month. So I made a decision. Not out of revenge. Not out of spite. Just out of necessity. For me. I wasn't going to pay another cent. Not until someone actually recognized what it took to keep that house functioning. I wasn't going to keep funding a home where I no longer had a room, a say, or even basic respect. That meant no more covering Dad's prescriptions. No more automatic rent transfers. I canceled the card on file with the pharmacy. I unlinked the electric and gas bills from my account. I even emailed the grocery delivery service and removed the house address from my list. I left it all in their hands. The first call came on a Thursday morning. I was folding laundry in the guest room at Savannah's when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was the pharmacist. She asked if Mr. Walker was planning to pay the balance on his insulin and blood pressure meds. Apparently they'd been filled, but no one had come to pick them up. The total due was $842 and change. I calmly explained that the previous card on file was no longer valid and that they'd need to contact the patient or his current caregiver. She apologized and said she'd make a note in the system. I told her that was fine and thanked her. Then I hung up and waited. It didn't take long. That night I got a call from Dad again. This time he sounded nervous. Not angry, just shaken. Ash, the pharmacy called. They said I owe over $800 for the month. That can't be right. Doesn't Medicaid cover that? I didn't bother to explain it softly. No, Dad. Medicaid doesn't cover everything. They never have. The insulin, the blood pressure meds, your testing strips, even the delivery fees when you didn't feel well enough to pick things up. I covered those. All of it. He was quiet on the line. I thought, he started then trailed off. I thought the government took care of that. No, I said. I did. He exhaled low and slow. I don't know how to cover that. You might want to talk to Brandon, I said, and this time I didn't flinch when I hung up. I found out from Savannah what happened next. She still followed Brandon on social media, and apparently he'd posted something cryptic that weekend about family surprises and being financially blindsided. I rolled my eyes when she showed it to me. But the next day I got the confirmation. My phone lit up with Brandon's name. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. I didn't even have to listen to the whole thing to get the gist. He was stunned. He sounded more annoyed than remorseful. Hey, Ashley, look, I didn't know it was that much. I thought Dad's insurance took care of all that. I mean, over $800 just for his meds. That's ridiculous. No one told me. You could have said something. I didn't call him back. I didn't owe him an explanation. He thought caring for Dad meant making smoothies and telling him to take walks around the block. He thought he could step into my place and fix everything with a week of healthy dinners and high-speed Wi-Fi. But real caregiving? That was copays and pharmacy arguments and late-night runs for low blood sugar and driving across town in traffic just to make it to a lab appointment on time. It was budgeting to the cent, remembering refill dates, and making hard choices between what to skip this month so that someone else could have what they needed. Let him feel the weight now. Let him stare down the bills and figure out how to make it work. I had carried it long enough. It started with a string of texts. Not from Brandon, from Rachel. She had never texted me directly before, not even when she was staying in my house, sleeping in my bed, using my dishes. But now, out of nowhere, she sent 5 messages in under a minute. Each one longer and more self-righteous than the last. The first one read, asterisk, Ashley, I don't know what's going on with you, but your behavior lately has been selfish and cruel. Your father needs stability, not drama. Abandoning him now when he's vulnerable is beyond heartless. Then another. Asterisk, we're doing everything we can to help him and you're punishing him because you're upset about a bedroom? Seriously? You're prioritizing your ego over your own father's health. And then the one that made me sit down because my hands were shaking. Asterisk, if something happens to him because you refuse to pay for basic necessities, that's on you. You should be ashamed. After everything. I stared at my phone for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood up, went into the guest room, pulled out the folder I had carried with me from the old house and sat back down at the table. Savannah was there working on her laptop, but she closed it the moment she saw my face. I think I'm going to send them everything, I said almost calmly. Savannah nodded slowly. You sure? I nodded. They want the truth? Fine. They can choke on it. It took me about 2 hours to scan everything in. The bank statements, the physical receipts, the handwritten budget notes I kept, the printouts from my online banking showing exactly what was paid, when, and for what. I created a clean, simple document broken down by year. Rent, utilities, medical, food, gas, unexpected emergencies. I even included the cost of the new tires I had bought for Dad's car 2 winters ago when the old ones were completely bald. Every line item had a date, a dollar amount, a short note. It was precise, boring, and impossible to argue with. 3 years. Over $95,000. That's how much I had personally contributed to keeping my father healthy, safe, and alive. All while working full-time, never missing a shift, and living in a home where I couldn't even call a single room my own anymore. I attached the PDF to an email. Subject line, since no one asked. And I sent it. To both Rachel and Brandon. I didn't include any angry message. No insults. No passive-aggressive remarks. Just the numbers. It took 20 minutes for the reply to come through. This time from Brandon. At first it was just silence. 3 dots typing, disappearing, reappearing, disappearing again. Then finally a single sentence. Asterisk, I had no idea. That was it. No defense. No excuses. No deflection. Just that. 5 minutes later another message followed. Asterisk, is this real? All of it. I responded with one word. Yes. There was no response from Rachel for hours. And when it did come it was short and strangely quiet. Asterisk, you should have told us. I didn't reply. As I had. 100 times. In every tired look, every missed dinner, every month I said, it's covered, even when it meant I'd be short on my own bills. They just didn't listen. Because they didn't want to hear it. Later that night Brandon called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail and this time there was no arrogance in his voice. Only confusion and something that sounded close to guilt. He said, I didn't understand how much you were doing. I guess I just thought things were taken care of. I never really stopped to ask how. Or who. He paused for a few seconds before continuing. I don't know how to fix this. But I'm sorry. For real. I should have been there. I sat on the floor of Savannah's room, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something uncoil in my chest. Not relief. Not forgiveness. But clarity. It was never about them understanding me. It was about me no longer needing them to. They saw the number now. $95,217.39. That's what love looks like when no one else is watching. The call came late in the afternoon just as I was finishing up some paperwork for the clinic. I recognized the number right away. It was Marie, my dad's part-time home aide. She'd been helping out with his medications and meal prep ever since I left, and I had nothing but respect for her. She'd always been kind to me, never treated me like an outsider, even when I was quietly packing up my life and slipping out the side door. Her voice was careful when she spoke. Too careful. Hey Ashley, she said slowly. I wasn't sure if I should be the one to tell you this, but I think you should know. Your dad's been saying some things. To me. To a few people. I froze. What kind of things? Marie hesitated. That you abandoned him. That you just walked out and refused to help anymore. He told the new pharmacist that you cut him off, because you were mad about your brother moving back in. Said you're living comfortably now, pretending like he doesn't exist. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had gone tight. I didn't want to believe it, she said gently, but when he started saying it in front of other people, I figured you deserved to know. My hand was shaking as I thanked her and hung up. I sat there at Savannah's kitchen table in complete silence, staring out the window like the air might give me an answer that made this make sense. It didn't. It never would. He was telling people I abandoned him. After everything. After 5 years of cleaning up his blood sugar crashes at 3 a.m., of arguing with insurance agents, of cutting corners on my own groceries to afford his meds, of choosing double shifts over dating, over friends, over sleep, he was telling people that I just walked out. I hadn't expected him to defend me. Not loudly. But I never thought he'd lie. I felt it in my chest, in a place so deep it scared me. Not anger, not even betrayal, but a kind of numb ache that comes when something inside you breaks and you're not sure it'll ever fit back together the same way again. That night I opened my laptop. I still had everything. The scanned bills, the itemized breakdowns, the prescription receipts, the transfers to his account, the text messages with Brandon and Rachel, even the pharmacy voicemails. I compiled it all into one clean, organized document. Not defensive, not dramatic, just facts. Every dollar, every year, every line of proof that I had not only been present, I had been the only one holding things together. Then I wrote the letter. I kept it short. I sent it to every relative we had on both sides of the family. Cousins, aunts, the uncle in Kansas City we hadn't seen in years but who always sent Christmas cards. I wrote. Some of you may have heard things recently about my decision to leave my father's home. I'm attaching documentation that shows the reality of the last 5 years. Every financial contribution. Every unpaid hour. Every sacrifice made quietly without complaint. I am no longer in a position to continue supporting someone who allows others to rewrite the truth for convenience. Please see the attached for the facts. I'm not asking for validation, just accuracy. I attached the documents and hit send. It took less than an hour for the first responses to roll in. My mom's cousin Julie replied in all caps, "I had no idea. This is insane." Another cousin Dana simply wrote, "You've done more than enough. I'm so sorry." One of my uncles, the one who never called me unless someone died, left me a voicemail. He didn't even try to hide the shock in his voice. "Ashley, Jesus, I'm embarrassed I ever believed a word of what your dad said." But what hit me the hardest wasn't the support. It was realizing how easily the truth had been buried until I made them see it. For years I had been invisible. Not because I wasn't doing anything, but because I wasn't making noise. I wasn't the one telling the story. My father had painted me as the daughter who walked away. He never mentioned that I'd spent most of my 20s making sure he stayed alive. That I had gone without so he wouldn't have to. It turned out people believed what they were told. But once they saw the numbers, once they saw the receipts, they started to remember. Remember the times I wasn't at family gatherings because I was working. Remember the holidays where Brandon breezed in and I stayed in the kitchen. Remember the way my eyes looked in those old photos. Tired but trying. I never wanted recognition. I still don't. But I refused to be the villain in a story I bled to write. He called me on a Sunday morning just after 10. His voice was quieter than usual, almost cautious, like he was tiptoeing through the conversation. He asked if we could meet somewhere, said he wanted to talk, said it wouldn't take long. There was a pause where he waited for me to say no, and I almost did. But something about how small his voice sounded made me agree. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Savannah's place and the old neighborhood. Neutral ground. I got there first and chose a table near the window, far enough from the counter that we wouldn't be overheard. I didn't order anything. My stomach was too tight. He walked in a few minutes later, slower than usual, wearing the brown windbreaker I remembered from winters past. He looked like someone who'd aged 10 years in the last few months. Maybe he had. He sat down across from me, nodded a greeting but didn't smile. His hands were shaking slightly as he wrapped them around the cup of tea he brought with him. For a minute neither of us said anything. Then he finally spoke. "I owe you an apology," he said. "More than one, probably." I said nothing. I just waited. He took a breath. I saw the letter. The statements. The numbers. Everything. And I realized. I didn't just let you go. I let them push you out. And I stood there and watched it happen. So I said nothing. "I told myself you were fine," he went on. "That you didn't need help. You always just handled things. You didn't complain. You didn't fall apart like Brandon did. So I thought, maybe I didn't even think at all. I just assumed you were okay." I looked at him then. Really looked at him. His eyes were tired. His face was pale, more lined than I remembered. I didn't see anger in him. Just something heavier. Something close to shame. "You didn't just let me go," I said quietly. "You gave them my room. You let Rachel throw out my things. You told people I left because I didn't care. You let people believe that. That's not just standing by. That's participating." He nodded. "Fully. You're right. I did." I swallowed hard. "You didn't just fail to stop it. You erased me. You let them replace me in the same house I carried for years." He looked down at the table. "I did. And I regret it." I could feel the heat behind my eyes, but I didn't let it show. I had cried enough for that house. I wasn't going to do it again, not here. He looked back up, and for the first time in this entire nightmare he didn't try to soften what came next. "I think I resented how much I needed you," he said. "And I took advantage of the fact that you never said no. That you kept showing up. That you never made me feel guilty even when I should have. I told myself you were stronger, and Brandon, well, he's always needed more. More attention. More help. More everything." He paused. "But that wasn't fair. Being stronger doesn't mean you carry more without breaking. And it doesn't mean you owe more." I let those words sit in the air between us. "I didn't know what it cost you," he added. "Not just the money. The years. The quiet. The part of your life you gave up to take care of mine." I looked at him then and said, "You could have asked. All those years. You never asked." "I know," he whispered. "And I'm sorry." For the first time in months I believed that he meant it. But forgiveness wasn't something I could just hand over across a cafe table. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because the wound wasn't a clean cut. It was layered. It went back years. Through every grocery run, every pharmacy visit, every night I stayed home while other people lived their lives. It would take time. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I don't trust you. Not yet." He nodded again, slower this time. "I understand." We sat for a few minutes more in silence. Two people who shared blood and a history but had to learn how to speak again, maybe even how to start over. When we stood to leave, he reached for his wallet and hesitated. "Can I pay for your coffee?" he asked. I hadn't ordered any. But I let him. Let him do one small thing. For the first time, maybe the first real time, I let him show up. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing about us ever did. But in the quiet months that followed that last meeting with my dad, things began to shift. Slowly, awkwardly, and without any grand speeches. Just small movements in the right direction. It started with a message from him. A photo of a brochure for a senior living community across town. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a modest, clean complex with decent on-site care and a kitchen in every unit. He told me he had gone to a meeting, spoken with the director, even filed the paperwork himself. He'd been approved for assisted living through one of the state-supported programs, the kind that covered part of the rent and medical costs. He said he didn't want to be a burden anymore. That he was learning how to manage things without relying on other people to silently carry the weight. I didn't respond right away, but when I did, I told him I was proud of him. And I meant it. A few weeks later, he moved out of the house. I didn't go over to help pack. He didn't ask me to. He and Brandon figured it out between the two of them. The house was sold not long after. A quiet, quick deal handled through an agent. No one made a big thing of it. One chapter closed. Another opened. By then my life had changed too. I had been working part-time with a local catering company Savannah introduced me to, just for extra cash while figuring out my next move. But I clicked with the team quickly, especially the manager who liked my organization and kitchen prep skills. Within 3 months, I was offered a full-time position as assistant event coordinator. And with the raise that came with it, I finally signed the lease on my own apartment. A small one-bedroom on the second floor of a brick building near the park. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I painted the walls a warm, dusty green and bought my first set of brand new dishes. The couch didn't match the curtains. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I walked through a door that didn't hold the echo of other people's needs. I made dinner for one and it was enough. Brandon reached out again a few months after our last real conversation. He sent a short text, said he'd moved out of the house even before the sale was finalized. Rachel had left again, this time for good. Apparently she had moved back to Oregon, and they were in the middle of finalizing their divorce. He said he'd taken a job at a used car dealership not far from downtown and was renting a studio apartment above a bakery. He didn't say much beyond that, just that he was working, staying sober, and trying to keep things simple. He didn't ask for a reset. He just told me where he was, and I appreciated that. Eventually we met up for lunch. It wasn't emotional or dramatic. He paid. We talked about work, about Dad's new place, about nothing and everything. He apologized again, not with words but with the way he listened, really listened for the first time in years. And I saw him trying. Not perfectly, but genuinely. As for Dad, he adjusted better than I expected. He made friends. He took up gardening in the little community patch they had behind the building. Marie still came by twice a week to help with medications and groceries, and he started attending a low-impact fitness class at the local rec center. He even started managing his own prescriptions, working with the program coordinator to set up auto refills and transportation. It was the most independence he'd shown in years. Sometimes he'd call just to chat. No requests, no guilt, just to tell me something about his day. And sometimes I'd call first. Our family didn't become some shining example of reconciliation. There were still gaps. Still quiet days. Still things that couldn't be unsaid. But there was honesty now, and that was enough. We stopped pretending. Stopped assigning roles. Stopped clinging to the idea that love had to look like sacrifice. We just showed up, each in our own way. And for the first time it felt like that was enough. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after years of noise. Not the kind that fills a house, but the kind that lives in your head, the kind that follows you around in the form of constant responsibility. That pressure to be the one who holds it all together. The one who doesn't flinch, doesn't ask, doesn't need. The one who sacrifices without ever expecting anything in return. When that silence finally came, I didn't recognize it at first. I had spent so long being the daughter who always said yes, who always showed up, who quietly carried things that weren't hers just because no one else would. But one morning, a few weeks after I moved into my own place, I stood in my kitchen, my own kitchen, barefoot, sipping coffee I made just for me, and I realized the weight was gone. There were no unpaid bills on the counter. No text from a pharmacy asking for another emergency payment. No bruised feelings to manage. No tight smile to fake when someone else took credit for what I kept alive. It was just me, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft light coming through the window, and the sense that, finally, I had chosen myself. For so long I thought being a good daughter meant giving until there was nothing left. That if I didn't take care of everyone else, then I was failing. But the truth is, I wasn't just a caregiver. I had let myself become a placeholder. A bank account. A live-in nurse. A fixer who never got fixed. And the worst part? Thought that was love. Now I see it differently. Love without boundaries is just slow self-destruction. It's smiling while you disappear. It's giving without being seen, until you forget you ever had needs of your own. I lived like that for too long. I don't anymore. Now I work a job I love. I have coworkers who respect me. I make plans without worrying if someone will need me to cancel them. I'm saving to start my own business. A small catering company, something that combines the skills I built while surviving with the passion I never had time to explore. I even let myself dream again. That part took the longest. And maybe most importantly, I am no longer anyone's quiet savior. I'm not the family's safety net. I'm not the one who absorbs the blow so no one else has to feel it. I am not the one who disappears just to keep the peace. They called it abandoning them. But it wasn't abandonment. It was survival. My father told people I left him. And for a long time that stung. But now when I hear that story I don't correct it anymore. I let them think what they want. Because the truth is I did leave. I left a house where I was used. I left a role I never asked for. I left behind the version of myself who believed she had to earn her worth by bleeding quietly. I'm not her anymore. I'd rather be the black sheep, the runaway, the ungrateful daughter, anything, than continue living as someone who never got to matter in her own life. They called it walking away. I call it finally coming home to myself.